Given that the box office metrics for the Fantastic Four First Steps by both Marvel and Disney is currently sitting at $249 million worldwide, that's global metrics by the way, whereas that Marvel and Disney, they are doing something very similar with the Fantastic Four, much like what they are doing right now with Ironheart, what they did with Snow White, as well as what they did with the Acolyte series back in June of 2024, and well, a lot of this has to do with the financial cutbacks and the financial collapse surrounding the Fantastic Four First Steps.
So these are 6 woke points that are all in this movie, which makes this movie fully woke. It's not just like one thing. They were like, yeah, they did this, but no, it's fully there.
5th, and ahead of its release date, they've been actually going into a lot of problems between both Marvel Studios and the Walt Disney Company, between the test screenings labeled as lackluster, and the reshoots labeled as problematic. There's been a lot of pushback going against this film as well. There's a lot of Marvel fans that aren't quite fond of the fact that they are using Shala Bal, the female Silver Surfer.
So, the question is, can a movie be woke and good? The majority of the time, no. The majority of the time, everything woke turns to shit. So, we'll see.
And shoehorning it into the press tour for Fantastic Four. However, with the Walt Disney Company and Marvel Studios still struggling over the Fantastic Four test screening failures, along with the problematic reshoots, Pedro is only making matters worse the more times he fires back at the critics and fans. A lot of pushback going against this film as well. There's a lot of Marvel fans that aren't quite fond of the fact that they are using Shala Bal, the female Silver Surfer played by Julia Garner, well above the character of Norrin Radd, and that's just one thing. We also know that Pedro Pascal and his politics are not helping, and it's only getting worse from this point. With Pedro Pascal making some of the worst decisions during the press tour for Fantastic Four, one major development going on now involves how he yet again attacked fans and said some of the most offensive things yet toward Marvel fans that is already creating a division ahead of the release on July 25th. Pedro delivered the following that are just really beginning to actually have a lot of Marvel fatigue and Pedro Pascal fatigue. That is very much real. And like I said earlier, his politics, his overall view on activism, it is not helping at all in the least when it comes down to Marvel and Disney. And the fact that Marvel and Disney allows him to go on that train wreck of viewing, of course, or spewing his politics into the public eye, it goes to show you that they really don't care at all. However, with the Walt Disney Company and Marvel Studios still struggling over the Fantastic Four test screening failures, along with the problematic reshoots, Pedro is only making matters worse the more times he fires back at the critics and fans. Now, Pedro recently delivered the following in a very defensive way that made things worse. I would definitely say that I'm a proud male feminist, activist, and one that defends LGBTQ rights, and most certainly diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you know, like all of those important things that belong to stay in this industry.
We've talked about Fantastic Four, First Steps before, but the update now is even more telling. Big opening numbers? Yes, over $434 million globally so far. But the drop-off and the press tour drama are quickly overshadowing the win. Pedro Pascal is leaning into the conversation, defending his co-star and firing back at critics, while Disney finds itself in a very familiar storm. Just like Ironheart, Snow White, and The Acolyte, there are whispers of underwhelming test screenings, costly reshoots, and fans questioning sudden story changes, especially the unexplained leap to a female Silver Surfer. It's the same recipe we've seen before, and it's playing out in real time. For Disney, the numbers on paper should have been a reason to celebrate. Fantastic! Four First Steps opened with $218 million worldwide in its first weekend, making it Marvel's highest-grossing debut since Spider-Man: No Way Home. Within 2 weeks, it crossed the $434 million global mark, climbing past Captain America, Brave New World, and Thunderbolts to become the studio's top-earning release of 2025 so far. But underneath those flashy headlines, the story isn't as steady as it looks. The film saw a sharp 60 to 66% drop domestically in its second weekend, steeper than the fall for Eternals, or Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. For a tentpole project positioned as Marvel's return to form, that kind of decline raises serious questions. Box office analysts note that strong audience retention is critical for blockbuster profitability, especially when production and marketing budgets can easily surpass $300 million combined. The comparison to other Marvel releases is unavoidable. While Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 kept more than half its audience into week 2, First Steps is losing momentum much faster. And that's before factoring in growing chatter online about the film's creative decisions, particularly the introduction of Shalabal as the Silver Surfer without a full character arc. Industry insiders suggest that Marvel's internal confidence took a hit well before release. Reports point to multiple rounds of reshoots in early 2025, alongside test screenings that drew muted reactions. Combined with an already tight post-production timeline, these adjustments may have contributed to a final product that feels uneven in pacing and tone. For now, the global total is still climbing, but Disney knows the stakes. If the momentum doesn't stabilize, the film could fall short of the $500 million benchmark, turning what looked like a clean win into a mixed result that investors and executives will scrutinize closely.
And whether or not newly released films are going to cut into those box office metrics, that's really up for discussion right now. And also whether or not the box office for Fantastic Four First Steps will be very similar to what Brave New World turned out to be once it actually made its course throughout all theaters.
If the box office numbers were starting to raise eyebrows, the press tour only turned up the heat. Pedro Pascal, stepping into the role of Reed Richards, has been front and center in promoting Fantastic Four First Steps. But instead of sticking to the safe talking points about Marvel's first family, his interviews have often drifted into defending the film against critics, sometimes suggesting that the backlash is rooted in something deeper than just plot or pacing issues. The most talked about moments came during joint appearances with Vanessa Kirby, who plays Sue Storm. Clips of the two holding hands, sharing hugs, and leaning in close during interviews went viral, with social media splitting into two camps. Some saw it as a sweet display of camaraderie and comfort in a high-pressure media blitz. Others framed it as overly familiar, sparking debates about professionalism on a press tour. Kirby later addressed the noise, saying these were moments of genuine support between friends who had been navigating an intense publicity schedule. Pascal, however, didn't shy away from challenging the criticism outright. In several interviews, he pointed out that some of the loudest detractors online had been skeptical about the casting from the start, raising issues like his age, his appearance compared to the comic version of Reed Richards, and the decision to diverge from traditional character portrayals, including the introduction of Shalabal. While these remarks energized his core supporters, they also fueled fresh headlines. Media outlets began framing the Fantastic Four conversation less around the film's story and more around its cultural and political undertones. For Disney, that shift in narrative focus is risky, especially with the Avengers Doomsday press cycle looming, where Pascal's role will be even more prominent. And as the interviews kept trending, another layer of speculation began to surface, one that suggested the backlash wasn't entirely organic. As the conversation shifted from box office numbers to press tour behavior, a new theory began circulating, one that turned the spotlight away from the film itself and onto the machinery of online discourse. Several entertainment analysts and fan community moderators noted unusual patterns in how criticism of Fantastic Four First Steps was spreading online.
Is also another big conversation going on right now, but one thing that's for certain is that Pedro Pascal getting involved and way too involved in politics, it's not really helping the situation at all when it comes to the press tour for the Fantastic Four.
Hashtags tied to negative takes on Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby spiked in activity at odd hours, often pushed by accounts with little to no posting history outside of this topic. Some observers believe this points to a coordinated effort, possibly from groups already opposed to Pascal's outspoken political stances, particularly his public support for marginalized communities. This wouldn't be the first time a Marvel project faced what appeared to be an orchestrated social media wave. Similar patterns emerged during the release cycles for the Marvels and the Acolyte, where sudden bursts of negative coverage overshadowed marketing beats. To be clear, not all criticism fits that mold. Plenty of longtime Marvel fans have expressed genuine disappointment with aspects of the film, from uneven pacing to the rushed introduction of Shalabal as the Silver Surfer without a fully fleshed-out backstory. These points echo concerns heard during early test screenings, which some insiders say drew lukewarm feedback months before release. But when genuine fan discussion gets tangled up with algorithm-driven amplification, the lines blur. What starts as a debate over character arcs or casting choices can quickly become a headline war between defenders and detractors, each side convinced the other is acting in bad faith. For Disney, That's a dangerous place for a blockbuster to live, because the more oxygen the controversy gets, the less attention is on the movie's strengths. And yet, the studio may have inadvertently fueled this fire by letting Pascal take such an unfiltered approach to interviews. That decision could have long-term consequences, especially with one of Marvel's most important ensemble films already in the can. Pedro Pascal's role in Fantastic Four: First Steps isn't a one-off appearance. It's the opening chapter for a character Marvel plans to carry directly into Avengers: Doomsday, one of the most ambitious ensemble projects since Endgame.
Is that he's really beginning to actually follow Pedro Pascal's steps of continuing to go against MAGA Republicans out there and really making things worse and dividing the audience.
Filming for Doomsday wrapped earlier this year, and insiders say Reed Richards will be a central figure in the storyline. That means any controversy tied to Pascal now doesn't just affect one movie. It bleeds into the marketing and reception of Marvel's next big tentpole. Disney has been here before, when earlier Marvel entries underperformed, like Eternals and Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. The ripple effects hit follow-up projects, softening audience enthusiasm and dampening merchandise sales. If Fantastic Four's reception cools too much before Doomsday's release, the crossover film could face an uphill climb, no matter how strong the script or star-studded the cast. Complicating matters further, Pascal's public defense of the film and his co-stars has become part of the press narrative. For every supporter who praises his authenticity, there's another headline framing him as combative or overly political. That narrative is already seeding into discussions about Doomsday, long before its official promotional campaign begins. From a business perspective, this is risky territory. Marvel's marketing machine thrives when fans are united in excitement, not split into warring factions over casting decisions or perceived messaging. If the focus stays on off-screen debates instead of on-screen spectacle, the studio could see diminishing returns, even on projects with massive built-in hype. And for Fantastic Four itself, the stakes remain high. Every percentage point drop at the box office now not only affects its own profitability, but also sends signals to investors and analysts about the future viability of Marvel's interconnected storytelling model. What's emerging here isn't just a reaction to one film, it's part of a larger trend that has dogged several of Disney's recent releases. What's happening with Fantastic Four? First Steps feels less like an isolated stumble and more like another entry in a playbook Disney has been running and struggling to execute for the past few years. The beats are familiar: early test screenings that draw underwhelming reactions, last-minute reshoots to address pacing and tone issues, and a major creative decision that polarizes the fan base before the film even premieres. We saw it with Ironheart, where the debut episode was delayed and reworked after lukewarm internal feedback. We saw it with Snow White, when Rachel Zegler's pre-release interviews focused less on the story and more on reframing the character for modern audiences, a move that split potential viewers. And we saw it with The Acolyte, where the series launched into a wall of online debate that overshadowed its actual content.
Fantastic. The problem that I have, and that I always have with MAGA folks, is that they never even admit when they are wrong, especially when it comes to their argument and debates on what they call wokeism.
Fantastic Four has hit those same checkpoints. The casting of Shia LaBeouf as the Silver Surfer wasn't rolled out with a gradual build-up or an in-story justification. It landed suddenly, with no prior MCU setup, leaving some longtime fans feeling blindsided. That reaction, combined with mixed early reviews, laid the groundwork for the kind of culture clash conversation that Marvel has repeatedly struggled to manage. For Disney, the challenge is twofold. First, to deliver a film that can stand on its own merits, and second, to keep the marketing and press narrative from turning into a referendum on the studio's creative direction. Every time the conversation drifts toward politics or identity debates, the brand risks alienating part of its audience, not necessarily because viewers reject the concepts, but because they feel the story has taken a back seat. And when the pattern repeats often enough, it starts to shape perception. Fans begin to expect controversy before the project even arrives, and that expectation alone can sap momentum from even the most ambitious releases. Which brings us to the critical point. If Disney can't break this cycle, the fallout won't just impact Fantastic Four, it could set the tone for the entire next phase of the MCU. With Fantastic Four, First Steps still climbing at the global box office, but showing signs of slowing, the next moves from both Marvel and Pedro Pascal will be critical. For Pascal, the upcoming Avengers. Doomsday is not just another project. It's the biggest platform yet for his Reed Richards portrayal. If the current debates surrounding casting, tone, and press tour comments carry over into that film's marketing cycle, they could overshadow one of Marvel's most expensive productions to date. Marvel, meanwhile, faces a strategic crossroads. The studio built its empire on consistent audience trust. Fans could buy a ticket knowing they'd get sharp storytelling, compelling characters, and a few surprises along the way. But in the last few years, a growing number of releases have faced heavy online debates that put the focus on off-screen narratives rather than on-screen spectacle. That shift changes how casual viewers approach a movie. Instead of asking, "Is it fun?" they're asking, "What's the controversy?" In this climate, the studio's messaging matters as much as the content itself. Keeping the focus on story details, like how Shalabal fits into the broader cosmic arc, could help reframe the conversation. Allowing actors to address fan concerns without escalating into broader political arguments might keep the attention where it belongs.
And look, I am so proud of what Kevin Feige is doing here at Marvel Studios, and what Disney is putting together to continue our efforts with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Typical MAGA Republicans will just immediately label that as some form of an agenda to make an argument or to create a talking point on their end to make them sound logical.
Pascal's willingness to engage with criticism makes him a unique figure in Marvel's lineup. He's charismatic, unfiltered, and capable of rallying supporters. But it also makes him a lightning rod. That duality could either energize Doomsday's hype or add fuel to another cycle of polarized coverage. For now, Fantastic Four remains a financial win compared to several recent MCU entries. The question is whether Marvel can convert that win into sustained audience goodwill, or whether this latest chapter will be remembered as another case where the buzz around the film outpaced the film itself. And with the next Avengers film already locked and loaded, there's little room left for missteps. One wrong move, and the narrative could turn before the first trailer even drops. Not every Marvel film that stirs debate faces long-term damage, but Fantastic Four: First Steps is different because of what it represents. This isn't just another installment in the MCU, it's the reboot of Marvel's first family, a property Disney has been planning to relaunch ever since acquiring the rights from Fox. Years of fan expectations, comic book legacy, and studio promises have been riding on this project. That's why the current climate of mixed reactions and headline-driven drama is more than just noise. It directly threatens the brand equity Marvel hoped to rebuild with this release. When Iron Man debuted in 2008, it wasn't just a film. It set the tone for a decade of interconnected storytelling that audiences grew to trust. Marvel wants Fantastic Four to serve a similar function for its next phase, bridging cosmic and Earth-based storylines and introducing new heroes. But for that to work, the conversation needs to center on the plot, the chemistry of the team, and the world building, not whether the press tour has gone off script or if fan divisions are growing louder online. And that's where the risk escalates. With Doomsday already completed and other related projects in development, the tone set by Fantastic Four could influence not just box office numbers, but also streaming engagement, merchandise sales, and the reception of future spin-offs. If the reboot becomes known primarily for the noise around it rather than the story it tells, Marvel may find itself trying to course-correct mid-phase, a challenge that rarely pays off cleanly. The stakes are higher here because this film isn't an endpoint. It's a starting point. And if the starting point feels shaky, everything that follows has to work twice as hard to regain momentum. If there's one takeaway from the Fantastic Four: First Steps rollout, it's that Marvel's old formula for building hype no longer works the way it once did.
When they are just stupid. The problem with MAGA is that they are like a virus, and it can be very hard to quiet down the noise coming from these people, that they have an issue with people that come from different ethnicities to take on popular roles. They like to call that race swapping. I see nothing wrong with that.
In the early 2010s, the studio could release a trailer, send the cast on a charm-filled press tour, and count on the Marvel brand to carry the rest. But today's audiences are sharper, more connected, and quicker to pick apart both the content and the marketing strategy. That means every decision, from casting to plot changes to interview soundbites, gets magnified, debated, and often polarized within hours. For Fantastic Four, this played out in real time. A casting choice that caught some fans off guard, early test screening leaks that set low expectations, and a press tour where the lead actor wasn't afraid to clap back at criticism. On their own, these might have been minor bumps. Together, they formed the dominant narrative around the movie before many people had even seen it. Disney could avoid this trap in the future by rebalancing its priorities. That means putting the storytelling front and center in marketing, giving fans enough in-world context to understand bold creative choices, and ensuring the cast is unified on messaging that keeps the focus on the film's strengths. It also means anticipating how certain decisions, like introducing Shalabal without build-up, will land with different segments of the fanbase. If Marvel wants the MCU's next phase to thrive, Fantastic Four can't just be seen as a box office experiment. It needs to be remembered as the project that taught the studio how to recalibrate for a more critical, more vocal, and more divided audience. Because if these lessons aren't absorbed now, the same issues could snowball into even bigger risks for Avengers, Doomsday, and beyond. Fantastic Four: First Steps was meant to be Marvel's clean slate, the moment they reintroduced their most iconic team to a global audience and set the stage for a bold new chapter. Instead, it's become a case study in how quickly a carefully crafted plan can be overtaken by headlines, debates, and online flashpoints. The film is still a financial step up from several recent MCU entries, but the surrounding noise is impossible to ignore. Pedro Pascal's unfiltered approach, the polarizing reaction to Vanessa Kirby press tour moments, the surprise arrival of Shalabal, and the echoes of past Disney missteps have all collided into a single conversation that's as much about perception as it is about performance. And perception, in today's entertainment landscape, can shape a project's legacy just as much as ticket sales. For Marvel, the stakes extend well beyond this single movie. The way Fantastic Four is remembered will directly influence anticipation for Avengers, Doomsday, affect merchandise sales, and even color how fans approach future spin-offs. For Pedro Pascal, the coming months will test whether his candid, combative defense of the film strengthens his standing as Reed Richards, or keeps him locked in the same culture war spotlight that's defined so many recent blockbusters. This is the point where Disney has to decide, will they double down on the current approach, letting controversy fuel conversation, or will they refocus on the storytelling that made the MCU untouchable for over a decade? Because if Fantastic Four becomes just another example of a project overshadowed by its own press cycle, the damage could ripple through an entire phase of Marvel storytelling. One thing's certain, the next update in this saga won't just be about box office numbers. It will be about whether Marvel learned from this moment or simply repeated the cycle again.